Great. Good morning, all. No surprise, we are all aging every day, and there's good news about that. The good news is the way we are aging is changing for the better. Our ability to live longer, healthier, and more productive lives is increasing. Unfortunately, some of us don't see it that way. Attitudes and stereotypes about aging haven't changed, including attitudes about sex and aging. I'm Rebecca Chaplin with AARP North Carolina. This morning, we're wrapping up our three-part series to change the conversation about age and aging. Aging is about growth, not decline. It creates new opportunities, not just challenges. And older people are contributors, not burdens. And each and every one of us should be valued for who we are, not by how old we are. And that's why we believe that we deserve to have a pleasure-oriented approach to touch and sexuality in life after 60. Today's presentation will feature Maci Daye, an AASECT certified sex therapist, licensed professional counselor, and the author of Passion and Presence, a couple's guide to awakened intimacy and mindful sex. Among other degrees, Maci has a doctorate in human sexuality from Parkmore Institute. Maci leads couples retreats, and her approach combines the curious and experiential spirit of Haikomi mindful somatic psychotherapy with Western neuroscience and contemporary sex therapy. If that sounds interesting to you, it really is. And on a personal note, I've worked with Maci over the years and just see her as an incredible mentor and true progressive thinker in this area. And I hope that your mind will be blown as mine has in working with Maci. We do have a large number of people on today's event, so we ask that you do stay muted. We're going to launch into the presentation soon and reserve the last 10 minutes for Q&A. Feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A box and chat with one another in the chat feature. It'll make it easier if you use the Q&A for your questions for Maci, for Chantel and I to moderate those at the end. Again, we are recording this session, and your name and image will not show up in the recording unless you unmute yourself or speak. Another good reason to keep yourself muted. This series was also created with my friend and colleague at UNC Greensboro, Chantel Carroll.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to see you all here and to hear from Maci this morning. As Rebecca said, my name is Chantel Carl. I am an assistant professor at UNC Greensboro in our gerontology program. And I would like for all of us to consider an intention today as we continue this conversation in thinking about exploring sexual expression as we age. And likely this is just one piece of the puzzle. Our experiences and sexual identities are varied, and age is just another factor that adds to that individuality. So I would like to have us all consider that a goal for our discussion today is to be respectful and inclusive of our various positions, identities, and experiences that we all embody as we age.
Beautiful intention. Thank you, Chantel. And I will add a spotlight to our featured speaker today. Hi, Maci.
Hello.
All right. We're going to go ahead and fade into the background and let you take it away.
Okay. I just want to say how much I loved that intro. First of all, it was so warm and inviting. Thank you. And especially that piece about, we go through a lot of challenges and there's changes as we age, but there's also opportunities. And that's my kind of the essence of my message today. Now, this topic is near and dear to my heart because this year I turned 63 and my husband turned 76. So we absolutely know firsthand what those changes are, what those challenges are, and what the opportunities are as well. I'm going to quickly share my screen and I'm going to go through some of the changes. What are we talking about? You probably also know about them firsthand, or if you were at the last session, you're pretty up to date, but let's get on the same page. So As we age, we do go through sexual changes. If we have a vulva, we typically don't lubricate in the same way. We may have what's called genitourinary syndrome of menopause, which is the current term for vaginal atrophy, which really means the thinning and drying of the vaginal walls. We likely have unreliable erections and our hormones change. So we may not be having the same kinds of urges as we had when we were younger. And all of these things make penetrative sex and arousal a little more challenging. And for some people, it's off the table altogether. Now, of course, as we age, we tend to have more health problems. We may have neurological difficulties that affect sensation or mobility or coordination. We may have heart conditions that affect blood flow to the genitals. And if you're on medication, you know that many times medication themselves have sexual side effects, ranging from dry mouth to bad breath to, again, restricted blood flow and an impact on the nervous system so that we don't get aroused as much, or it's harder to feel desire. And then if we just think about our bodies, many times we're less flexible, we have less stamina, certain positions put a strain on the joints, and statistically, we're more likely as we age to have breast, colon, bladder, testicular, or prostate cancer, all of which affect function. And for many people, create self-consciousness around appearance post-surgery. Okay, that's the bad news. It sounds really scary. And many of us, kind of just assume, well, I guess that's the end of my sex life as I know it. And what I want to suggest, there's many ways we can look at this, that this stage of life can be a new journey, an opening for us if we reorient to sex so that we think of sex less as an act and more around expanding our eroticism. And our eroticism is boundless. And indeed, it has no expiration date. So today, just going back to the slides for a minute, I want to introduce you to 3 skills that are informed by mindfulness. There we go. That can support this kind of new beginning or this lifelong erotic expansion. The first skill is called befriending. The second skill is seeing fresh. And the third is mindful touch. And my hope is to do a little bit of a taster of 1 and 3. We'll work experientially and we'll do a little thought experiment. And I'll tell you a story to illustrate seeing fresh. So let's start with befriending. Befriending is a way to make peace with change. You probably heard the expression that the only real challenge with change becomes a problem when we resist it. And actually, I agree with that. I agree that the more we can embrace and allow and accept what's happening as we age, the more access we have to our erotic potential. The trouble is that when we throw around the word acceptance, it often gets translated as like, deal with it, just get over it. And indeed, our mandate, if we live in the West, culturally, is often just like jump over the pain, still yourself, and soldier through. I definitely don't recommend that approach for a couple of reasons. One, change, even positive change, even change that we have initiated, always carries painful or difficult or confusing or complicated feelings like loss or grief or regret or disappointment or uncertainty. So those kinds of feelings are really part of any journey, any developmental journey. including our erotic journey, they're not a problem per se until we start resisting them or take this soldier through mentality. Because what's likely to happen is we're actually going to get more stuck and more resentful and resistant of what's happening. And these are very real feelings. These changes that I just listed can be a change in identity. It really can feel like, wow, chapters of my life may be closing. That's real, and we want to honor that. And when we do, we actually open up to what's possible. A good example would be if for some reason we can't eat some of our favorite foods because we have digestive problems or we've developed allergies or we have diabetes, that's something to mourn. But we don't stop eating because eating is so pleasurable. So we either diversify our palate, we broaden out to find new foods that are as tasty and possibly more nourishing, or we learn to really savor what we can enjoy. So befriending is what enables opens the door to those two options. And it really starts with 4 simple steps. And you may be thinking right now, where is she going with this? I mean, I thought we were coming to learn about sexuality. But I have to tell you that as a sex therapist, I focus more on the felt sense of the body rather than how well it functions, and more on our mind or our consciousness. For me, that paves the way to the opportunities that we're foreshadowing already today. So in all of my work, I have yet to meet somebody who's not in some kind of pain or confusion or fear or feels shame or inadequacy. And we actually want to make space for that. And then we can see what wants to blossom. So the 4 steps, this is one of those easy but not simple practices, is number 1, to start by acknowledging the feeling without trying to change anything. And acknowledging happens, and you're going to actually get a handout for this, so you don't have to take notes on this. Acknowledging happens when we give the emotion a name. And then the second step is we actually start to research the sensations that accompany the emotion. For example, we might notice some heaviness in our chest, or we have a kind of tightening in our belly, or a prickly feeling, or a fluttery feeling, or a pinching kind of feeling somewhere, or our jaw tightens, or we get a lump in our throat. So we want to research what are those sensations. And then step 3 is opening and allowing that. This is where we're actually doing the befriending. We're softening our defenses. We're welcoming the experience. And then the last step is we're sending warmth to ourselves. So I'd like to do this little practice, which is, we could call it a spiritual or even an existential kind of a practice. And if you'd like to pass, by all means, that's your choice. If you want to, for some reason, turn your camera off just for this exercise, you're welcome to. We're just going to spend a few minutes locating a feeling around sex and then befriending it. So if it feels okay, and I really trust you to listen to yourself, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes, or you can keep them open and look downward, soft gaze. And we're going to start with about a minute or so of mindfulness. So I'm going to invite you, as you're sitting on your seat, to start to bring your awareness inside of you. So you've been listening to me, your attention has been outward. And now start to redirect so you're seeing with your inward looking eyes. And then start to put your attention on your breath. And by that I mean really the physical sensations that accompany the in-breath as your body expands and the out-breath as your body releases. And today you may be sensing your breath in your lower belly or more in your nostrils or somewhere in between. And when thoughts come, as they will, just gently come back to the breath. And hopefully just through a little bit of training attention to rest with the breath, you're located more inside of yourself. And from here, I'm going to invite you to call to mind your sex life, whether it's dormant or active, whether it's partnered or solo. And as you start to sense into this, see if you can locate some emotion that's a little bit painful. Don't go for trauma right now. It's okay if this is subtle. It could be in the category of grief or loss, or fear, or feeling of inadequacy or awkwardness. Could be unfilled longing. And now we're going to go through the steps. So the first step is simply to acknowledge the feeling by giving it a name, like, oh, sadness is here. Or yes, this is grief. And then we're going to start to research the physical sensations that go with this, much like a scientist would. We're merely collecting data. So see if you can wake up the emotion a little bit more so it's actually here with you, not just an abstraction. And as you do that, just start to sense what's happening inside your body. And now we're going to move into the allowing, the actual befriending part. And as you're sensing these sensations, as they're awake to you now, I want to invite you to breathe alongside of them. It's almost like you might imagine the sensations are on the right side and you're breathing alongside of them on the left side, or vice versa. And it may even help to say the words as you breathe, softening and allowing. Softening and allowing. Now, if you're finding it difficult, here are some other statements you can try saying to yourself and just notice the effect. We're not trying to make the feeling go away. We're trying to grow our capacity to be with it bit by bit. So try saying, this is only an unpleasant sensation. I don't have to like this sensation, and it's here already. I'm safe. Allowing, opening. This is only an unpleasant sensation. And now we're going to move to the fourth step, which is sending some kindness to ourselves. And I'm going to invite you to take a hand or two hands and put them where you're noticing the sensation. And pause to notice. Notice the contact. And then start to send some warmth through the hands. Now, if this is hard for you, you might imagine that these hands belong to someone who loves and accepts you completely. And what would you want a friend or loved one to say to you when you have such a feeling? Maybe it's something like, oh, I know, it hurts. Or I care about your pain. I'm with you. Maybe it's okay to feel like this. And as you're doing this, just notice how your relationship to the feeling is right now. If there's a little more room for it, or if you're finding this to be really hard, which is a lot of people do. And now we're going to bring this to a close very gently, so you can put your hands down. And you can take another breath and find your own way back. And then I would love for you to put some comments in the chat, because when we have a group this size, we can't be verbally interactive, at least right now. The time will go like that. But it's how we build resonance, how we lie with each other in this area, which is so vulnerable and delicate and tender for so many of us. Again, the intent of befriending is to make peace with change, enable us to honor the reality of our experience, and also to be able to open up to what life has in store for us next. An end is always the start of a new beginning. And that's what we're going to focus on for the rest of our time together. So I'm sorry that I'm moving through this rather quickly, but I really do want to give you some tools, not just concepts. So the next skill that we're going to move into, and keep writing in the chat, hopefully we'll hear some later, you can be reading them together. The next skill that we're going to talk about is being fresh, but I want to start with a thought experiment. So I want you, if you're willing, to again close your eyes just for a second and let some images arise of what for you is great sex. Just let some images come to mind of what for you is great sex. And then I'm going to invite you to let images come to mind of older people having sex. Just kind of open up to see what comes when you do that. People in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Soon we'll be saying hundreds. Now, when you linger with the second image, the image of older people having sex, let's notice the effect it has. Do you like get excited about what the future holds for you, or do you notice you kind of deflate? Do you have a sense that sex in your next decades is going to be enjoyable, deeply pleasurable, or that there'll be not so much, maybe a little bit of pleasure here and there, but not a ton of enjoyment, no real heat, and possibly no sex at all? If you're like most people, you likely are comparing this image when you preview your future or whatever's happening for you now, and compare that to the sex you once had. Most people find their image of late stage sex lacking. And I want you to notice if that's true for you. That your vision of what's in store or what you're already experiencing feels like you have to settle for something too small. We're going to come back to this, but first, I want to talk about biscuits. Oh, okay, there we go. Now, I'm not actually going to talk about biscuits. I'm going to talk about a biscuit baker. So Ed Green wrote a fabulous book, some of you may have it, called the Sahara Bread Book. He was a resident baker at a retreat center in California years ago, and he was a star at making bread. However, every time he tried to make biscuits, he ended up extremely frustrated because the biscuits never turned out right. And he was determined. He tried multiple batches, changing the type of fat, the type of flour, the pan he was using, the height of the tray, the temperature, and they never turned out right. So one day he asked himself, right? Like, right compared to what? Like, he realized that he had some image in his mind of the right kind of biscuit. And as he researched it, he realized, oh yeah, it's this, Pillsbury. Now, if you're not from the United States, Pillsbury is a commercial brand you can find in just about any bakery. You take this kind of tube, you whack it on the table. It's kind of cool the way it uncoils. And then you find 8 perforated biscuits that when you bake them up, they turn out to be buttery, crispy, flaky, and exactly the same every single time. So when Ed realized this, he was like, oh, you know what? I haven't even tasted my biscuits. I haven't actually tasted my biscuits. And so he tried an experiment of his own. And the experiment was, let me empty my mind of my image of a great biscuit, of all of my preconceptions, all of my mental models. Let me smell this biscuit, take this biscuit, taste this biscuit. And lo and behold, they were fantastic. In fact, he had a literal mouthgasm as he was eating them. Now, Ed Green was not only a baker, he was also a mindfulness teacher. And he understood how our filters, our mental filters shape our experience for better and worse. And he understood too that our conditions are constantly changing. And so rather than going, oh, I nailed it, This biscuit is it. He came to call each batch of his biscuits the biscuit of the day. The biscuit of the day. Now, imagine orienting to our sex life like this. There is no last time to compare this to. There's no goal. There's no how was it in my 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s compared to now. It was not just the biscuit of the day, it was the sex of the day. It was this encounter as an only, unrepeatable, unique experience, its own kind of expression. And I firmly believe, well, let me back up. I get to say it now. I firmly believe that we can enjoy rewarding sex across our lifespan to our last breath when we continually adjust to fluctuations in our energy, cravings, capacity, and mood, and see fresh. This is the game changer right here. We have all internalized a mental model of what sex is that's limiting. And if we can dispense with that and open to the experience that's unfolding self to self or self to other, we can take many different directions and discover things continuously that, like this biscuit that he tasted finally, are delicious, Now, the problem is, this is how we can expand our eroticism when we let go of our pictures of what it should look like. We can be playful, we can be silly. We can be like, look at these lips just coming close, but not even touching. We can play with the energy there. There is so much we can do and savor that takes us into expanded states of consciousness that literally, you use the expression, Rebecca, blow our minds. Not that that needs to be a goal. Okay. The problem is we hardly ever do this. We usually enter with a goal in mind, with a standard, with a reference point, and get into what I call a performance trance, where we're rating our experiences as fail or succeed. And that puts tremendous pressure on us. And when we're oriented towards acts and functionality and competence and technique, this is where we're heading. And in contrast, a mindful approach is open and exploratory. Now, there is when we're like this, in this open field of possibility, not bound by concepts, we're in what I call our pure erotic potential, because we are free to make up movements on the spot, new sounds. We can flirt, we can dry hump, we can linger with an earlobe or the inside of our thigh or a toe with no need to get anywhere, and have a highly erotic experience that does not depend on a firm penis. It does not even rely on genitals at all necessarily. All right. If you're going, I'm a bit skeptical, and I certainly understand if you are, I want to share with you some research. And the research was conducted by Peggy Klein-Platz. She is a sexologist, a psychologist, and professor in the School of Medicine at the University of Ottawa in Canada. And she has devoted decades to researching something called optimal sexuality. Now, those of you who work in academia know that if there is any funding for sexuality, it's to solve some kind of problem. But she said, no, I want to know what makes sex great. And so she gathered a fairly massive sample group, of which, check this out, a third were 65 and older, many in relationships of 25 plus years, who claimed to be having great sex. And what she found was that it did not depend on orgasmic ability or function or technique, because not a single person mentioned an orgasm, a position, or an act. So what did they say? And there were younger people in this group as well who claimed the same. So what was it that accounted for this magical optimal sexuality? Here it is: being present, vulnerable, exploratory, open, energetically in sync, and having a playful spirit. Let's take a moment to let this land. If this is the key to great sex, being present, vulnerable, exploratory, instead of following a set course or a template, open, energetically in sync, like we're tuning in, if this is partner sex, to each other, and having a playful spirit. We can all do that. We can all do that. So this is why one of my mottos is that great sex is a mindset, not a skill set. It doesn't depend on functionality. Because if we remove our concepts, as I said, we can go in any direction. Now, if we're on the path of erotic expansion, there are two ways we can have it: the wide path and the deep path. The wide path is doing more. It's adding variety. It's turning up the volume so we're having more sensation, where the emphasis is on doing. And it's a fine path: more positions, toys, erotic scenario, lingerie. The deep path, however, is experiencing more. And this is where this mindset of being present, curious, and exploratory pays incredible dividends lifelong, because the emphasis is on being, allowing, opening, perceiving, experiencing. And here's the thing: as we age, it sometimes feels like options are closing off to us, but the deep path is always available to us. And that requires cultivating a particular state of mind, not doing more. There is this quote that I love by the poet Yeats that says, "The world is full of magic things, patiently waiting for our senses to grow sharper." The deep route is about sharpening our senses. Now, we have pleasure receptors all over our bodies. The whole body is an erogenous zone. Now, what's interesting is the possibility of experiencing pleasure requires nerve endings. That's true. But the probability that we will feel good, that we will have good feelings, depends entirely on what we're paying attention to. And that's the deep route. It requires tuning in, opening the senses, and savoring. And one way that we can help our senses grow sharper is through the practice of mindful touch. So I'd like to spend just a little bit of time doing this activity with you. Now, again, you're completely free to pass. You're completely free to turn off your camera. Just a preview is we are going to be touching our hands in a very particular way to sharpen our senses. So if for some reason you feel self-conscious or uncomfortable and you want to take the camera off, okay, that's fine. We're all going to have our eyes closed and our attention is going to be inside and with our hands. But let's try this. If you're going to do it with me, let's start by rubbing our palms together really fast, rubbing our palms together. Now, this is kind of the wide route, where we feel we have to have a lot of friction and intensity and turn up the sensation and effort to get this happening. But we actually feel more when we slow down. So I want to invite you now to close your eyes and explore with finding a pace, palm to palm, where you feel the most sensation. And we're going to bring in this exploratory, playful, pressure-free kind of attitude. So just see if you can access that. Just being curious. You know these hands really well, but see if you can just meet these hands as if for the first time, like discovering the ridges and the wrinkles and the bony parts, the rough patches, the smooth patches. And you can expand from the palms to maybe feeling between the fingers or even clasping your fingers or on top of the hand. And as you do this, just tune in, open your senses. And if there's pleasure to be had, just enjoy it. Now, continue. Typically in partner sex, there's a giver and a receiver. So I want you to try on being the giver to yourself. You can give to both palms or both hands. And what that means, because mindful touch is about putting our attention on the point of contact between the finger and the skin. As the giver, your awareness is with your fingers. What do you sense in your fingertips as you touch your skin? Changes in temperature, perhaps, cool areas, warm areas. Maybe there's a little tingling in the tips of your fingers that spreads. And you can play around. We're being playful, so you might want to tap or pinch a little bit or have a long stroke, just seeing what changes. Maybe you want to hover above the skin. And then let's make a switch just because of time. To this time, your awareness is the receiver. So it's your skin and inside your skin that you're tuning into as you're receiving touch. It takes a little bit of kind of working with your mind. And same thing, as you're the receiver, there's no goal. We're not trying to arouse ourselves, although energy may turn on a little bit, that's fine. We're just sensing, we're just see as the receiver, if as you sense the finger making contact or the palm, if you can telescope in on the sensation. You might notice little currents of energy in other parts of your body. And now you can pause by resting your hands in your lap. Keep your eyes closed. This is just a taster, but I want you to notice your energy right now. Like just sense into your whole body and see if you have more or less energy right now. And where do you sense it? Okay, you can bring this to a close very gently, gradually come back. And I want to just say a word about energy because Eros is simply energy. You know, when you take a plug and you put it into a wall socket, suddenly there's light, there's energy, appliances work. It's the juice. It's really the juice that lights us up and turns us on. And all of us can access that anytime we want. We don't have to have a craving for sex. We just once again tune into our felt sense, open and savor, and let ourselves receive. Let ourselves receive. And this is really our birthright. And when many people say that part of what contributes to the kind of aging we don't want for ourselves is when we unplug, when we decide, oh, that's a thing of the past. Because we can start to feel our Eros energy, our sensuality right now. I'm not even touching myself. I can notice where the fabric is touching parts of my skin. I can feel the air on my face. I can tune into parts of my body and just turn like the radio dial to the pleasure channel and just start to tune in. It's kind of amazing. We don't need a partner. And this is an ageless kind of practice. So I want to bring this to a close because I know we have some questions by mentioning the late David Schnarch. David Schnarch was an incredible psychologist, couples therapist, the author of many books, one of which was Passionate Marriage. Many people read it, you may have. In that book, he famously says that great sex and cellulite are correlated. Now, of course, he's being a little humorous, but what he's doing is he's saying, folks, let's not confuse genital prime with sexual prime. Genital prime being in our teen years and early 20s. Sure, you know, we did have firm erections. We had natural lubrication. We had hormones giving us that little boost. Most likely, the kind of sex we were having was hormonally driven sex, which is completely fine from a moral perspective and appropriate. You know, this is built into our design, but it's also limited. You know, as we age and evolve, so does our eroticism. And we start to realize the diverse, many ways we can nourish ourselves erotically. Physically is one, emotionally is another through our connection, psychologically through play, role play, maybe power exchange, you know, sort of playing with taboo, and more transpersonal forms of erotic nourishment, which is really about using the erotic portal as a path to mystery, something greater. And people who like that nourishment often report states of bliss, a kind of merger, a kind of ecstatic state. And from, in my opinion, I don't rank them, they're all wonderful. Eros lays out this banquet for us. But as we're older, we start to appreciate that Eros comes in many forms. What's more, as we age, we have a lot more emotional intelligence, more heart possibly, and soul, a greater capacity for depth and intimacy. So what David Schnarch was saying, we actually bring more of ourselves to the table. And what that means is so much more can happen. Again, if it's with ourselves, solo pleasuring, or with a partner. So if you take anything away from this presentation, I hope it is to free your mind of concepts, appreciate your whole body, bring your full self to the experience, and have an exploratory, full spirit. Let go of thinking about sex as an act, whether it's intercourse or oral sex, though those things are great, they're just limited. They're actually limited. We often see that as the apex. It's one thing on the menu. There are so many, many things we can feast on. And perhaps when people say, gosh, it seems like sex really changes as you age, you can say, you bet it does. My body changes, the experience is different. And the sex I'm having today is as good or better than I was back then, which is what my husband said at 61, and what the sex educator Susan Bratton says, also 61, when she describes her upward pleasure spiral. So the 3 skills: befriending to embrace change, to emptying our mind through seeing fresh. So we're actually meeting this experience as a one and only, releasing goals, and mindful touch to help our senses grow sharper is the path to really harvesting these opportunities that Rebecca named, that I'm saying are waiting for us if you haven't already experienced them yourself. And that's what I got. Are we going to open up for, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maci. I'm going to grab a question here from the Q&A first, and then I've jotted some comments and other questions down we had in the chat. So in our Q&A, the question is, my spouse is no longer interested in sex, but I am. What suggestions?
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing is, I'm going to go the other way around. One of the problems we sometimes encounter is we depend on our partner to turn us on, arouse us, make us feel desirable. And then we no longer are what we might call sexually and erotically sovereign, right? And David Schnarch talked about this a lot, a kind of borrowed functioning. We don't have the autonomy to find our own experience. So first of all, there's a ton to befriend there. I'm so sorry. I mean, that's a huge loss. And sadly, it's very, very common. I imagine there's other people in the room who have the same experience. So I would enjoy the sex you can have with yourself, and see if, as you light up more and feel freer and more playful, you might be able to introduce that to your partner in a non-threatening way, because I'm sure Dr. McCarthy said that so often people give up on sex because they don't want to start something they can't finish and they feel inadequate. And if that's true for your partner, to start to expand what you're talking about, just pleasuring each other can be highly invitational. So that's my response.
Thanks so much, Maci. Another one that might be maybe somewhat connected in a different way, where their partner is embarrassed by the intimacy of sex. And
Yeah,
so how to, the example was even like looking each other in the eyes. So
yeah,
how to be able to feel close to your partner when that kind of barrier is there.
that's so beautiful. Well, I love working with those kinds of barriers because there's a lot of information there, right? That's not just happening. I like to say that our life themes play out on the erotic stage. So my guess is being intimate and connected and being seen and seeing has deep roots of, early learning that are shaping that response today. So the beautiful thing about mindfulness is we can start to investigate what's going on if the person's curious and open. If they're not, again, this is the perfect thing to befriend: how lonely you feel, how separate and disconnected, and this unmet longing to feel like we're really in this experience together. However, the way you feel intimate and the way your partner does, the eye gaze may be way too much, but maybe there's something else. Maybe it's like a little squeeze that says, I'm with you. that you might ask your partner for in this moment, or could you say my name? Or could we just breathe together, eyes closed? I just want to feel you and be with you. And I would ask your partner, what are they up for? You know, so often there's one person who's like more comfortable and the other person sort of lagging behind, feeling inadequate, and then they start digging their feet. And if we again meet with understanding and compassion and curiosity and say, this is what I long for, to feel connected, and I want to honor your way. What would work for you? You could menu some possibilities like I did, and it might jar some response from them.
I just gotta say, I love, quick aside, all of the different paths that you take and you bring to the table. And some of the comments we've had in the chat have said the same thing, that this conversation has been liberating and it's food for thought. And I think that that's one of the things when we talk about sex that we get so honed in on. It's just this one path, when really there's so much more. We had another question in the Q&A. This person mentioned that they have a permit to purchase medical marijuana, which helps them sleep. Do you know, and I don't know if you do, but do you know of any variety of marijuana that can also open to sexuality or impact?
Oh my gosh, this is a big thing these days. There are fully legal, they don't have THC. So as you probably know, the hemp plant has THC, which is the psychoactive, get high part of the plant. And then it has CBD, which presumably doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. And you know, marijuana hemp is being used for all kinds of conditions, but CBD is now available in many lubes that you can spread all over your body. One that I just read about today, I'm sure we can't promote brands, but if you just research it, you will find fully legal, and people claim that it is making arousal so much easier. So much easier. But let's understand that as we age, we have to go slow and build in time, because the fast route that we may have relied on to get off is probably not quite as available. And for people with vulvas, it was never probably the preferred way. So slowing down, taking time, letting arousal build is so beautiful, to feel more and go that deep path.
Well, thank you. Maci, do you have, like, we might go over 2 minutes. I have 2 last questions. Is that all right?
I
All right,
do.
everyone, if it's okay with you all, if you have to leave, we totally understand, but I did want to get to our last 2 questions in our chat. So we might go over just a couple of minutes.
No
so
problem.
one of the questions was, and I do think these last 2 are somewhat related, or I can see the connections in my mind. One of the last questions was if their partner is addicted to porn, and or that's how they feel. I'll say that. I don't know any of this, but that makes them no longer attracted to their partner. And so, what do you do in that case, where I guess your partner is doing things perhaps for themselves, but that attraction is now, you're no longer attracted?
Well, I've been influenced a lot by Marty Klein. I've taken courses with him. I love him on porn. And I have a different view, and a lot of sex therapists do these days. We don't see it so much as addiction. We see it sometimes as, if there's remorse, maybe some out of control behavior or some compulsions. But we live in such a sex negative world that we often condemn porn use and kind of use it to legislate sexuality. So I am going to be careful in using the addiction word. But what I do hear is, again, the grief and pain that a partner has pulled away and seems to no longer feel attracted or want to engage actively in sex. Again, befriend, because if we don't befriend, we're just going to come out of the gate attacking and blaming, and we're not going to really get the kind of responsiveness and teamwork that we're looking for in solving the issue. And then I would look into what else is going on in the relationship that there's not attraction. You know, if there's a ton of resentment, if there's been a lot of complaints and critiquing, if there's unrepaired hurt, those things clog the pipes to intimacy. And it's so much easier to just get off on porn, so much less complicated than dealing with another person. So the porn may be camouflaging some other issue, or there may be something going on for the person that they're, using porn to regulate their emotional states. And so I can't give an answer to that because there's not a single answer. I would want to know both parties and know about their relationship to be able to start exploring what all of that is about. And then the solution comes from what emerges through that exploration.
Absolutely. And then I wonder if you've experienced this next question, or if you've been met with couples for this next question in your practice. The question is, can one stay with a partner in a loving relationship, but where interest in sex for the partner is no longer, and then open that relationship to some type of open arrangement, or exploring other partners in an intimate way while still maintaining the integrity of that loving relationship that just lacks that interest?
Absolutely. If the question is, can you, 100%, and many people do make that decision. There's a plethora of books now and therapists that can help a couple navigate opening the relationship. While if you choose to, there's many forms of consensual non-monogamy to make your current relationship primary, but non-sexual. The key, again, as you might tell, a lot of my work is with couples, and I'm very much about teamwork, collaboration, consent. And so, having those discussions are very delicate and tender as well. But certainly that's an option. It's not the first option that I would probably go with, but it's a valid option.
Well, thank you so much, Maci. We've been getting only positive comments in our
Oh,
chat.
I'm
So
so
thank you
happy.
so much for having this conversation with us today. Thank you all for joining us on Zoom. You will receive the link to this recording and the previous 2 recordings in the follow-up email, and I'll leave it to Rebecca if she has any closing words for us.
It's been a real wonderful journey to be with all of you through these 3 sessions. And I want to offer my heartfelt thanks to Chantel for her collaboration, and to Maci for joining us today and sharing her gift with you. She lives out of the country, so she really had to zoom in from a distance to be here. And I want to thank each of you for being here and the courage that it takes to show up for these conversations and being on the leading edge of what's possible for you as you age. So we'll go ahead and say goodbye for now. We will be sending you a link to the presentation and a handout, a link to the YouTubes from all 3 of the presentations, and a survey. We would really want to know what you think so we can continue to offer programs that you value. Have a
Thanks, everyone.
wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Thank you.